Welcome to another episode of the Skytale Insights podcast. I am Annie Robertson Hockey, President and Head of Consulting at Skytale Group, and I am so thrilled and fortunate to be here today with Alyssa Rapp, who is CEO of Empower, an aesthetics platform, and this is episode 1 of our exclusive platform series where we dive into the trends and the themes and the world of M&A in the spaces in which we operate. So we're thrilled to have you here, Alyssa.
I'm delighted to be here, Annie. Thank you for including me. Honored to be the first. We'll blast it out to the masses, get you more listeners.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I think just starting out, you clearly have an incredibly impressive role. I think that the title speaks for itself, but you also have what I think is a particularly interesting path here. As a small anecdote, Alyssa, you were a professor of mine at the Stanford Business School, where
Time flies.
So we've actually known each other for a long time. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about your career and kind of how you found yourself here.
Yeah, I think that the easy answer and starting point is right out of Stanford GSB. Like you, we're both Stanford Business School alumna, and I ended up there ages 24 to 26 and started my first company out of there, which was in the wine space. It was an e-commerce concept in the wine space. And when that wrapped, I wanted to use a decade of knowledge in a category like the US wine industry and the global dynamics of the wine industry and turn it into a course that could be used to teach future generations of aspiring alcohol bev entrepreneurs, which is how I ended up teaching at Stanford Business School and originally how we ended up intersecting. That class I taught for 6 years. I then moved on to more general managerial stuff like managerial skills and other classes at Stanford, which will always be near and dear to my heart. But when my husband, Hal Morris, and I, who were also business school classmates, decided to move from Palo Alto after 14 years to Chicago, where we're both from, I then pivoted from teaching at Stanford Business School to Chicago, as you might imagine, the University of Chicago, which is a little closer from a commuting standpoint. And love and adore Stanford, always will, and have been given an open invitation back. So when geography is a little less tenuous with a 10 and a 12-year-old daughter and husband here in Chicago and a mother, then I will maybe go back. But as it relates to the career arc, after that first company was exited to a hedge fund, I ended up doing 2 years of advisory work for 2 family offices and 2 private equity firms, one each in San Francisco and Chicago, and used that as an opportunity to try my hat in private equity more than just venture capital-backed companies. And I learned a bunch of things. One, private equity is a different speed and sport than venture. I love venture. You love venture, Annie. We both have had wonderful life experiences through the world of startups and venture-backed startups. I now love to operate in the venture world as an investor. I like to make seed stage angel investments and be an LP in venture funds and not necessarily back venture-backed companies or teach a global new venture challenge for Booth, forgive me, which helps aspiring entrepreneurs do a better job and a smarter job of launching new ventures. But I loved the speed and sport of private equity. And while I took from the consumer bev space and luxury goods space and started doing the advisory work, I realized that I would love to run something again once our youngest Henriette was 2.5 and we ended up moving back and thought that consumer goods and consumer internet would make the most sense. I ended up talking to Sterling Partners, a Chicago-based private equity firm and family office, about a bunch of their consumer internet platforms and running one of those when we first moved back in 2018. And as fate would have it, the folks at Sterling and I had a good click. And I was assessed by GH Smart, and as a CEO was a good CEO fit for them, but they had a need for a turnaround at a B2B healthcare company of all things. I think it was the Surgical Solutions chapter was an extraordinary one on a lot of levels for me personally, because I always had the belief that strong leadership transcends industry. In that case, it did. It was a turnaround, which is more entrepreneurial in nature. The PE firm gave me a lot of latitude and a lot of faith to bring in the people I needed to overhaul the executive leadership team. I had a lot of green but great talent who just rose to the occasion and performed. And the business model needed tweaking, and the bets we made strategically on how to tweak it made sense. And I added some tech enablement in creating what I coined the surgical cost management platform built on Salesforce, which ended up being incredibly useful to my ability to manage and assess the use of labor consumption, disposable consumption, and repair incidences of the minimally invasive surgeries that our surgical solutions team supported, and originally 20 hospitals and 34 by the time I left. And it was a really great experience and first foray into healthcare, because while initially I felt like I had gone 20 years back in time and joining a company that was low tech enablement, B2B, not B2C, and and in literal physical hospitals. In the end, I realized that it was a relationship development, same store growth strategy, relationship building, empowering teams in a multi-site environment, and all of that stuff felt really natural and really good and really fun. From that experience, Houlihan Lokey, the investment bank, sold Surgical Solutions. And so one of the folks there then made an intro to me to Shore Capital Partners as that company got sold. So like with Skytale, always have great relationships with your bankers. You never know where they'll lead. Great bankers have lots of value in life, not just the deal they're doing for you, like Skytale. And we've loved working with Skytale at Empower, by the way. And so they made the introduction to Shore. They were looking for women executives to join a board for a women's health platform they were launching that was an OBGYN roll-up. And that was a good fit. And once I got to know Justin Ishbia, the managing partner, and then Mike Cooper, one of the founding team members and founding partners at Shore, it was a really good personal click. And then I realized with Justin, I had multiple points of connectivity. My husband's a former professional baseball player. He obviously owns baseball teams and other sports teams. We had other points of connectivity, and a very dear friend of mine, and Lauren Hamlin, whose father was one of Justin's first mentors in PE, and so on and so forth. So that is how I got involved with Shore initially. And then in the Together Women's Health journey, which has now been 5 years, and the CEO, Anthony, he was just nominated as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and the company's crushing it. I'm really proud of them and proud to be part of that. I loved what I saw in how Shore managed microcap roll-ups, and they liked what they saw in me. And so when they thought about launching another women's health platform in Empower Aesthetics, I was eager to see how they started platforms, wondering if someday I'd want to start my own with them or on my own or what have you. And so I joined them at AmSpa, saw that whole world for the first time 4 years ago, which was eye-popping, and also saw how Shore put together a thesis and a platform, really liked that as well. So while they wanted me to be more involved than I was able to be initially, because of a fund I was running called Health Well, we'll skip that for now, I was able to join the board of Empower, and that was a really also positive experience in the first year, even although initially the platform faced some challenges. So cut to present, I had been on the board of Together Women's Health for a few years, Empower for a year and change, and the original CEO for the platform needed to step away for family and health reasons. The platform had done one mediocre acquisition and two good acquisitions at that point, and they needed someone to step in and really take it to the next level. And they flatteringly asked me to step off the board into the CEO chair in December of 23. The timing worked for me because I just finished up the 24-month shot clock on the SPAC I had been running, which had a 24-month time limit. It was a very easy yes to say yes to stepping into the CEO chair on an interim basis for partners you like and need your help, and a business you know as a board member. The decision to say yes on a permanent basis was something that required a little bit more thoughtfulness by husband Hal and me. And first of all, Shore is second to none in terms of microcap roll-up. So if you are going to do a microcap thesis, I love working with the best of the best in anything I do. And these are the folks who do microcap best. The returns are second to none. 7 times average cash on cash returns. It meant that we'd be delivering great returns for investors, great returns for seller partners who roll over equity, for team members. That made sense. And I thought I could even better learn their playbook than just as a board member. And second of all, the space is, better than anyone, Annie, is red hot. All the industry trends on the demographic groups entering the space as customers and consumers, on the scaling happening of individual med spa sites with great consulting advice from you often along the way at Skytale. The fact that we'd be putting millions of dollars in the hands of women entrepreneurs was very on brand for me personally and very meaningful. The course I teach at Booth now is called Women as Investors, Directors, CEOs, and Executives. We have 2 daughters. I want them to go into a world where they believe that 50% of the world's finest leaders are women, just like the world's finest people. And so, the fact that we would be giving millions of dollars of rollover equity, let alone cash, to these seller partners was exciting. And the fact that it was going to be an opportunity to build a team again and take another crop of some seasoned and some green talent and chart these choppy waters of entrepreneurship and private equity. That felt fun and exciting. And as always, it's harder and takes longer than you ever expect, but gratifying nonetheless. And I think that's how I ended up here. Long-winded answer to your question.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for sharing that, and I learned some new things. So I appreciate it, and there's so many things I relate to in what you said. I think the thought of strong leadership cutting across industry is something I fundamentally believe in. Tell folks earlier in their career to follow strong people and to follow learning rather than, necessarily fixating on an industry and sort of like leaning into that prematurely. And also, of course, this is an industry where the vast majority of our clients are women entrepreneurs, and it's really fun to see them build pretty rock star businesses and then sell to folks like you and make a real chunk of change that's meaningful and changing, will change their lives and their family's lives. For me, that is incredibly motivating. I love making women rich. But one of the things I
Actually, to that point, Sally Krawcheck, who founded Ellevest, says nothing bad happens when women have more money. So I think that's I like what you said. We'll quote
yeah.
Sally.
um I always love your candor, and I think sort of acknowledging that, like, one of the acquisitions was great, or a little mediocre. Some were great when you came in. I like, there's no way that platforms bat 100% when they're acquiring businesses. And something we have talked a lot about in the past is just how difficult integration is. This is something I've experienced in a previous life when, in my previous job, we acquired a company. Now it's something that we do a lot of work around. When you as a leader are thinking about, you now have many brands under your Empower sort of banner, and probably I imagine are making trade-offs in terms of, okay, like, what's really important to standardize across all of these, and what should I let go, or even what should I leave in the field, because that's sort of the secret sauce of what makes that practice really, what made it attractive to us in the first place. So how do you think about those trade-offs?
I think that at Empower, that's a really challenging and fun discussion to have from a strategic standpoint. What's challenging about it is that for there to be economies of scale, operationally, marketing wise, people ops, technologically, and more, it requires some pain and change. And the reason that pain and change is valuable when you take an individual practice and pull it in is because, in theory, you should grow faster for less cost and less challenge and have more found profitability by joining something with greater scale. You should have fractionalized access to Fortune 500 C-suite leaders that you wouldn't necessarily ever want to put on your individual P&L as a small business owner, and you get to join something in a community of partners where there's best practice sharing on so many levels, clinical, operational, and otherwise, which is 1+1, where 1+1 = 3. So the honest answer to your question is, we are a house of brands, not a singular brand. We are intentionally buying and partnering with entrepreneurs who have built something and a flavor in their market which is second to none. Otherwise, we wouldn't be partnering with them and vying and fighting to partner with them and beating out others to partner with them. And we want none of that to change. We want that local connectivity, pulse, relationship to feel the same the day after close as it did the day before. And what we want to have happen is all the back office stuff that clients don't see and even clinicians don't necessarily have to see unless it's a new comp plan statement or something, compensation plan statement, which would be better than what they would have had on their own, or like the benefits or the 401k or the mat leave benefits or anything else should have been better when they join us than on their own. We want all of that pain to be pushed to the centralized operations so that the clinical leaders and business leaders can focus on growth, clinical excellence, and customer satisfaction, and we deal with the scut work that we can deal with that makes it easier for them to do those things with less pain. Mm-hmm. That's the promise. I think that the art and the science of this, and like what activities from a marketing standpoint you keep global versus local, is an ongoing discussion and negotiation. Operationally, there's pretty big alignment, but we also need to have a dashboard of key performance indicators platform wide that I can assess, that our Shore can assess, that future partners can assess, that is consistent. So the honest answer is it's a dance. In things like technology and technology rationalization, we can borrow a page out of other Shore partners' playbooks. And what we do in that case is say, okay, well, Southern Orthodontics Partners is a 300 million revenue company at this point of a roll-up of all sorts of orthodontists. And their CEO is on my board at Empower, and John Nelson is someone I've known for a long time then. He's been a terrific partner to us. He says to us, hey, when we are at the same point as you at 10 partners, 12 partners, 20 sites, doubling, year over year, we found it useful to rationalize down to 2 or 3 electronic health record systems. You pick one, you're too limited because some partners are going to hate one and not the other. But if you pick, 2 or 3, you have enough choice that it won't be a too limiting factor in the partners you bring in, but it'll still be limited enough that you can consolidate enough that when you pipe all that data into a data lake, it's an easier process to then pipe into Power BI, which we use for front-facing dashboards, and then ultimately into your financial accounting system. We use Sage Intacct, others use others. So the honest answer is we borrow pages out of the playbook of other shore success stories in terms of what to consolidate and how far in some cases. We use our own judgment in others about how much marketing should be global versus local. And we use obvious, sort of relatively inflexible decisions on payroll and banking and audit and other things like that, without that level of consolidation, you really haven't moved the needle. So I guess that's the simplest answer to a hard question I can give you.
So it sounds like, like many things in this industry, sort of an art and a science, at the end of the day. And there will, it's impossible for everything to be fully consolidated. I mean, we work with so many platforms, and there's like ideal world, and then there's reality world, and it turns out we're all actually working in reality world. But I like that idea on the EMR of 2 to 3 options. I mean, something I've even found as a consultant is never telling someone this is our preferred vendor, because honestly, if they don't like it, then it's on me. Like sort of always giving folks choice, because at the end of the day, it's our job to curate the list and say, we've worked with these folks, they've all been excellent, or here's the ecosystem, here are the qualities that are the general parameters of each. But of that curated list, I think giving the autonomy to the actual person who's going to be using it is I think that's wise. And then no fingers will be pointed at you, Alyssa, if it's painful, which let's be honest, it always is, because tech transitions and implementations are hard. Sort of no matter how you spin it. So I think, another question I would love to get your take on, something I'm asked a lot about, is just the state of the economy and where we are in the world. And are we seeing a softening? And, in light of macroeconomic events, I'd say kind of how are you thinking about growth right now, and potentially changing consumer sentiment around spend? And has that shifted your approach to, say growth, or even, M&A versus de novos, et cetera, this coming year?
Yeah. The macroeconomic climate right now has been told by many a fancy expert from Goldman Sachs on down for months and years that the sky is falling, and hasn't fallen yet.
Yeah.
We see moments and flickers of challenge in regional pockets, and then we get braced for a fallout, and it still may happen. The current macro political uncertainty in the Middle East doesn't help. There's lots of stuff that could make things change. But at this juncture, we have a recession plan that I had to prep and share with Shore. That is a plan of, if it goes south fast, which levers will we pull and strategies put in place. And I wouldn't say operate as business as usual, but we operate to maximize our client experience in the delivery of outcomes now in the way we have been, while hoping for the best, while planning for the worst, is the honest answer to your question. My crystal ball isn't working today. I cannot tell you if and when and how. The world seems to think the correction will come.
We could have really fun questions if your crystal ball was working.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, it's not. But I'll let you know if it starts to flicker again.
Yeah.
But in reality, we are very focused on buying practices that are growing. It's very important when we are deep in a diligence process, as you've seen in closing a deal. We have weekly updates on how the practice is performing. So growing versus shrinking is crucial. That's on a practice by practice level. And then as a platform, the standard to which we are held is, are we growing beyond that industry growth rate? And if we are, we're winning and we're adding value. And if we're not, we're not.
Yeah.
I think that we should, continue to hold ourselves to that standard and continue to hope for the best and plan for the worst.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the fact that you have a contingency plan, I think actually is unique. So that's great to hear. But, I think determining your strategy out of fear and or something that hasn't happened yet isn't
Mhm.
necessarily the approach. You know, like there needs to be a plan, but if something hasn't happened yet, it's really hard to decision or ideate off of that. So I think we're all kind of in a wait and see moment. But you know, in light of the fact that we're all in the space, I think it probably speaks for itself in terms of our optimism too about where the industry is going. Needless to say, you know, I'm not particularly worried. Um, but sort of, you know, on that note of the industry and your crystal ball, I think, you know,
Mhm.
if you're to sort of, you know, 5 years from now, look at the ecosystem and where we are, you know, whether from a consolidation sort of perspective or even from just an innovation perspective, like what does the future of the space look like to you?
Yeah, that piece of my perspective is not limited to a crystal ball. That's more strategic planning, and you and I do both enjoy doing that, so we can have that conversation based on tactics. I think that this industry pattern matches several other that Shore has seen, and you and I have probably seen in terms of the pace and style of consolidation. Two or three family offices or private equity firms come in to consolidate. They have early traction, some explosive growth with, you know, success, and then others are fast followers and they come in and they go for it. When you enter, it doesn't necessarily determine success, and how much value you add to the practices you buy is probably what you buy, and how much value you add is probably the greatest indicators of who wins and who doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
We are at a point that you know as well as I, where 4 or 5 or 6 deep pocket platforms are running at a similar strategy. We are at a point where when 2 or 3 of them end up vying for the same deal, that drives up multiples. And we are at a point when I'd say 5, 6 of us who will end up anywhere between 50 million in revenue and 150 million in revenue, let alone up to 200 million in revenue, and the bigger folks in the space like Cosmetic Physician Partners. You know, once that happens, it would make sense strategically to me for a couple of those players to go through plate tectonics and join forces. Why? Because there'd be some corporate cost synergy, and probably you avoid driving up multiples when in that context. I wouldn't say we're there and that has to happen now. I wouldn't say that, and you would know better than I as well, Annie, you know, are we all abutting each other in every deal? No. I mean, it's relatively fairly fertile ground. There's still some proprietary deals for many of us to have. There's still, and there are very competitive processes too that you run and others run, and that's, you know, the dynamic I described. If I were a betting woman, I would expect that one of the largest scaled platforms will have an exit this year or next on his or her own. That exit would be a rationalization of all the work that all of us are doing behind the scenes. I don't necessarily think that would be a merge concept. It could be, but I could be wrong. But I could see one of the two bigger players, you know, over 120 or 130 million in revenue, having an exit to another PE platform or otherwise, or strategic, I suppose, but most likely to a sponsor. We'll see. And I could see that accelerating the interest in potential mergers of some of the medium-sized players. Maybe not. Maybe everyone keeps going it alone, and then all of that happens over time. In the end, if this follows the patterns of orthodontics or vet or any of the other places where Shore and many of the other folks have played, what will happen is there'll end up being 2 or 3, you know, major platforms, multiple continent connectivity, and they'll be vying for, you know, the massive win, right? I wouldn't say Pepsi Coke, it's a little too strong, but this idea that you would end up with 2 or 3 bigger players. On a personal note, if I were a wishful thinker, which I am, this space has so many trends that I like in terms of cash pay, women's health, growing TAM, total available market, growing customer base into the market, pipeline of talent into the market from a provider standpoint, that it feels like it has the long industry tailwinds that could also make it a great IPO story. I don't necessarily believe that that's going to be tomorrow. I think it could be 5 years from tomorrow. I mean, it could be tomorrow, but I doubt it. But it could be. The IPO market's still relatively choppy. But do I think in 5 years some massive platform doing 50 to 100 million of EBITDA should take one of these medical aesthetics super platforms public? Heck yes, I do. Think of all those, you know, phenomenal providers on the New York Stock Exchange ringing the bell. It'll be a beautiful photo, right? I mean, I think that, and more importantly, a great entrepreneurial story for all the entrepreneurs, mostly women and a few secure men who are there making this happen. So I think that that would be what I would like to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years. But in the next 2 to 5, I'd expect one or two of the big platforms to get sold and repurchased, and I'd expect a couple of the medium-sized ones to come together. And I don't know which ones. I obviously can't speak to where we will play in that world, any of that, but that's what I would expect to happen. So that, I don't know. How do you view it, I guess, is the real question, Annie.
No, I don't disagree. I think we're all sort of waiting in the sidelines, looking for really that first exit, from one of the platforms to the next institutional backer. I think will be precedent setting, right? I think we will all be watching that and sort of all curious to see where the numbers land. And this is where, I really believe that all of the platforms are in so many more ways more aligned than competitive, because if any one of them does well, the rest are going to do well, right? Like there's lots of space here. So I'm excited. I think it'll be sooner rather than later, because some of the like aesthetic partners started in 2018. They're some have been around for a really long time. So I think the next year will be an exciting year. It would also be fantastic to see an IPO. And I think, I'm starting to get excited that the IPO market is like, there have been a few recent successes, the Chimes of the world, et cetera. And so I'm excited that hopefully things are turning around. And, if there's a success story there in this industry, it would be a beautiful photo, literally and figuratively, for that to happen. So as we kind of wrap up, I have just sort of a few kind of rapid fire, more, I guess, fun kind of personal questions for you. First of all, what would you say is the hardest part of your job? And then we will sandwich that with what is also the most fun part of your job.
The most fun and gratifying part of the job is easy to answer, helping these seller partners come to the platform and realize some of their entrepreneurial dreams in that, quote unquote, sales process and partnership process, and taking a bunch of chips off the table and getting millions of dollars wired into their account, and then having this rollover equity in the platform as a whole, and watching that not just make them richer, as you said succinctly earlier, but more importantly to me, selfishly to me, watching how they have a renewed sense of purpose and drive when they end up with a rollover equity piece in a larger platform, and realizing that they're one of many now, and they own a piece of all of these other med spas, and how can they help, and how can they share their superpowers with the others, and what can they learn from the others, and that sense of community and team, that's really gratifying at the field level and the seller partner level, and really, really fun. Kind of spearheading our clinical advisory board, listening to them, learning from them, one of all the most fun things about the job. And then, of course, managing our team, right? Our team only exists at Empower, the corporate team, to live in service to the field. There are no jobs on this corporate team without a field, right? That the whole point of our existence is to serve them and help them grow faster, operate more effectively and efficiently, get financial wins done, all the things. And so with that, I do believe that helping my team grow as individuals, this will have been a major chapter in their career arc, but a chapter, right? Helping to understand them, learn about them as people, what their goals and aspirations are, help them fulfill those dreams and aspirations, get those, different learning modules downloaded into their brains and hearts and minds, helping them grow as people, and then, of course, putting together a high-performing team. That's the work of any CEO. That's the work of any business leader, and that's the work that drives and fuels me. That's fun. Helping deliver the best experience to our seller partners that join us, and helping deliver the best team experience to my team members. That's why I get up and what I do every day, and that's the why. And of course, ensuring we deliver clinical excellence and clinical outcomes for our clients is equally fun, satisfying, and crucial. Those positive testimonials, photos, what have you, are very gratifying. If you do those things well, and those stakeholders are satisfied and motivated, then the make money part, sell the business part, all that happens. And I'm not even going to talk about that. That's table stakes in being effective at one's job as a PE-backed CEO, but that is the outgrowth of doing the work, having a mission and vision around which there's broad-based alignment and belief, having shared values, cascading those down from our organization into every person in the field, and feeling like we are all winning as one team. as an anecdote, I was at Dr. Swift, the famous Dr. Swift, conducted a Swift beauty training in Chicago this weekend. 20 of our currently 90 injectors were there. And just meeting them, seeing them, watching them meet each other, it was really gratifying, and realizing we are building a team, a national team of people who believe in each other and want to know each other and learn from each other. That was really gratifying.
That's a really cool thing that you were able to be there and see that. I mean, I always, so, as a leader, my main customer or client is my team, point blank. And I fundamentally think that if I have a happy and healthy, motivated team, my clients, our ultimate Skytale clients, will be well served. And I think there's such a corollary in this industry in terms of, if you have happy, healthy, figuratively and metaphorically, again, providers, I think that the patient experience flows from that. And, there's some pretty compelling data around, provider retention and patient retention and loyalty, and those two things just really go hand in hand. And I think it's really hard to have a really wonderful patient experience if the providers there aren't feeling valued by their team. So it's wonderful that is not only sort of a business necessity, but also aligned with what brings you energy. Because at the end of the day, like, this leadership has to be sustainable to you too. And the things that bring you energy, making sure that those are aligned with your day job. That's important, right? Because a lot of hours go into this, I'm sure. I guess, just sort of looking back again across your career, not necessarily Empower, are there, one, two, just lessons or sayings or anecdotes that stand out to you in terms of just sort of defining leadership?
Yeah, I mean, when I went to Surgical Solutions and had this exercise of, accepting a role in healthcare, B2B healthcare, and then stopping and saying, "Oh my God, what have I done?" I then, called my closest friends who'd done turnarounds in PE. I got their reading lists. I kind of started to contemplate what lessons I had learned in my life as a very serious child athlete or a dancer and any other things, and realized that, kind of did the pattern match on what skills and lessons and traits would be useful to me in that lap of the journey. The outgrowth of that became the book I wrote, Leadership and Life Hacks, that came out 5 years ago. And when I've talked about, which is 70% leadership, 30% life, and when I mostly targeting working women, but not exclusively. And the two hacks, quote unquote, that I have been asked, that have resonated the most with folks writ large, have been, I guess, my best answers to this question. And one of them is this idea of seeking episodic versus daily balance. There are going to be episodes in your life, and every week in some ways is its own episode. And what does that mean? If I woke up every day and tried to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect CEO, the perfect lecturer in management, the perfect friend, et cetera, it'd be pretty, stultifying. That's just a lot to accomplish in a given day. So I try to be pretty ruthless about what my priorities are in a given day. Like, really, right? Yesterday I took our 10-year-old to sleepaway camp in northern Michigan, and it was a 12-hour drive, if you can believe it. I had an au pair helping me with the drive, just to be fair. I did, 5 hours of work calls on the way back, with the au pair helping me with the back half of the drive, and got a bunch of quality time with our daughter on the way up. That was the day I was trying to get, the stakeholders were work and mom. My husband, Hal, had Audrey at a tennis tournament in Indianapolis. It's 95 degrees out there. God bless her. And I hope she's okay today. But the other days of the week, right? And now they're all out of the house today for the first time, I think, in ever. And so it's like, today I get to, the two stakeholders are CEO and CEO. There are days where I've got to be a mom and a wife. There are days I have to be a daughter and a mom. There are days where I'm a board member and a CEO. There are days or a lecturer in management and CEO. You get the point of the story. So in a given day, I try to be really ruthlessly honest with myself about who the key stakeholders are, and leave it all on the field for those stakeholder groups. It doesn't mean you ignore the other stakeholders, just like you wouldn't leave your dog unattended to with food and water or caretaking, but it's not the priority. You have to have a system in place to make sure those needs of the other stakeholders are met in another way. Whereas if, I'm trying to nail being a CEO today and doubling down on it in all ways and forms that matter, this is it. I better give it my all. I better be highly focused. I better maximize my time, and I better leave it all on the field. And if you think about time and balance is not something to be achieved in a single day, but in several days or a week or even 2 weeks, if you widen the aperture of time And think about satisfying all stakeholders over a little bit broader base of time versus a single day. It becomes more achievable, and it puts the burden on you to be balanced in how you're spending your time, but also honest about whom you're prioritizing in a given day. And if that's like, if you're trying to prioritize mom that day and you're staring at your phone and on your screen the whole time on emails, like, you're not doing a great job at that. So like, then you're not getting an A, and that wasn't the right stakeholder to prioritize, or you didn't get an A in that day. And getting A's matters to me, right? And feeling, and not the fictitious concept of a grade, but really showing up, being present, showing up matters, being a present person for whatever that activity is what matters most. So widening the aperture of time and thinking about balance to be as achieved over several days or a couple of weeks, not just an individual day, that episodic versus daily balance is probably the most quoted and a bit iconoclastic idea that I think I put forth in the book, that I've had the most corporate women's discussion groups, et cetera, ask me about. And then the other idea is a really also, I think it's feministic and not at the same time, but probably more yes than no. Like, the other most quoted idea is put your own oxygen mask on first. And that's not a unique quote to me, but the idea that it is your job to set the tone of your day. Like, I have to work out for an hour every day. That is sanity, not vanity. That is, and if at 5 a.m. is all that it can be, then that is the time. And I better damn well get up when the buzzer goes off at 4:45. That is my responsibility. It is no one's responsibility to set the tone for my day but me.
Yeah.
It's no one's responsibility to take care of me but me. And I have a whole family and household for which I would give my right arm, my husband and children I love and adore, and a mother to whom I'm very devoted as well. And like, I also have a whole team of hundreds of people who work at Empower, to whom I'm deeply and profoundly, for whom I'm responsible, right? I have to make sure I do what I need to be shored up every day with the mindset and the strength and the good health and focus to be able to be the best version of myself for all of them. And that's how I do it. And now, whether one thing is working out or meditating or a walk with a dog or a cup of tea at the beach, like, I can't tell you what your thing is, but the other leadership hack, value, whatever you want to call it, I would say is that whatever your thing is that centers you and motivates you and prepares you, you need to do that. And that's no one's responsibility. It needs to be as immutable in the schedule as anything else. And those two things, episodic versus daily balance and putting your own oxygen mask on first, I think are probably my best leadership hacks for the audience, as well as, ones I try to live by.
Wow. Well, thank you. Those are,
You're welcome.
it's wonderful. There's so many things to sort of glean from this. And I think, I often will think about, if you try to do everything at the same time, you're doing nothing well. And I think,
Totally.
parenting with a phone is such a good example of that. Um, and in terms of sort of your latter point, my anecdote is Pilates. There's like one block on my calendar every day that my team knows. There's like, if Annie is going to be a smiley person, this can't get scheduled over. And I, God bless them. Like, they never schedule over that really precious.
Well, because you've set up the boundary of what works for you, and they respect it. Because if it were a doctor's appointment, no one would be asking questions. And if it were a meeting with Skytale leadership, no one would be asking questions. It has to be. And listen, I do it at 5 a.m. because that's when it works for my collective schedule. It's not, if I'm lucky 6, that's when I sleep in. But like, I'm not telling you when to do it. I'm not saying inconvenience the world for your own happy place, but I do think protecting what you need is your responsibility. And if you don't do it, no one else will. And I'm not saying you don't get your work done. I'm not saying you don't have to be available off hours and making those choices. But this idea that you are going to prioritize yourself, your health, your happiness, your mental state, I think is really crucial, because there's no one else's whose responsibility that is.
Your job is not going to establish boundaries for you.
No, and not in this day and age, not if we want hybrid, flexible work environments from it either, right? You can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to set those boundaries up, and that's hard.
There's one anecdote that I think is in line with this that I'll share from my past company. And this was the week where Silicon Valley Bank sort of imploded, right? And what that meant was, my little bitty bank was suddenly flooded with what we were getting desperate calls from founders, from venture capitalists, et cetera, just trying to wire money to our company. So we basically, pencils down, we bought everyone nannies. We said, we're sorry, your spouse doesn't need to like take this sort of for us, right? But everyone is going to be required to the company for the next full 14 days. So there's no weekends here. And It was so interesting because I think, I was sort of like gunning up to be like, I guess this is, like all-nighters and this is going to be this thing. And my co-founder said something to me, which I think about all the time. And he was like, no, Annie, this is the moment where we have to do those things more. And it was like, wow, you're right. Like if this is sort of the mecca of my, leadership moment, like this is where you are required as a leader most. This is when you need that oxygen mask the most, actually. And so like intuitively, that's when you like take your protein powder and you sleep your hours and you, Alyssa, you get your hour workout because like that is what you need to really show up and be that anchor that your team needs in crisis moments, like sort of good crisis moments or crisis moments, what have you, like that.
I think it makes a ton of sense. We are not surprisingly aligned. I mean, there's just, you can't, I mean, Rahm Emanuel, the former congressman, mayor of Chicago, ambassador to Japan, all the things, had a very famous line when he was chief of staff to the White House under Bill Clinton, which is never waste a good crisis. So as crises go, I mean, there's nothing more aligning and easier to like drop everything and get hyper focused and create a high performing team and hot group and all the things. As it relates to day-to-day life, this idea of in crisis state, that makes total sense. In everyday life state, it's how do you create that filter, that focus, that high performing mindset every day, all day. That's the piece that I think requires these ideas of episodic versus daily balance versus or oxygen mask. But what you just described, I agree with completely.
Well, Alyssa, Empower is very lucky to have you.
Well, and Skytale's very lucky to have you, and I'm flattered and honored to have been on the Skytale Insights podcast as one of your first platform discussions, and I'll look forward to hearing the others as well. And thank you for the opportunity, and thank you for the partnership. We've had I'm not being paid to say this. We have had a very productive relationship with Skytale, and we look forward to an ongoing productive relationship. We think you bring great businesses to market, and you do great work on them behind the scenes, and we're grateful for the opportunity to work with you.
Oh, well, thank you. And I know the sentiment is obviously very, very mutual. So thank you for giving us this valuable hour. And we look forward to hearing you on the air.
Likewise, take good care.